So we've been talking a lot about the offensive side of free agency for the Bills, but I want to spend this time to talk about the defensive side because I think this is very important because obviously you have to fill out both sides of your team here and try to make it as well-rounded as possible. Fill as many holes as you can before going into the draft. But as we've noted multiple times now, the Bills have to clear up over $50 million in cap space just to get back to the cap floor. And then you're probably going to want to clear up an additional 30 to 40 million so you can go spend in free agency and then have enough to spend on your incoming draft class. So I think the biggest priority on the defensive side is re-signing Daquan Jones and re-signing AJ Epinesa. I think those are two key pieces to this defense, specifically on the defensive line, that the Bills cannot afford to lose. Now, I will throw Leonard Floyd's name in there, but he's already said that he wants the money and he wants to go win. He can win in Buffalo, but can the Bills give him the money that he wants? I'm thinking that he's going to want a 1-year, $10 million deal, somewhere around there, give or take, but the Bills aren't going to have that money for him. So I'm thinking that they need to make it a priority to say, we need to go sign AJ Epinesa. And for what it's worth, SpotTrack has him with the $5.6 million market value. I'm thinking it might be a little bit more for Epinesa. I'm thinking roughly a 2-year, $12 million deal. I think that'd be fair for both sides because Epinesa really hasn't lived up to that draft hype. You know, he's shown some flashes, but he's also been inconsistent. So I think this is a case where the Bills can say, hey, we want to give you a 2-year deal because we don't really know how to price you yet. So we're going to give you a 2-year, $12 million deal, 2-year, $13 million deal. And I think he would say, you know what? I kind of want a 2-year deal myself. I want to bet on myself and say that I'm going to really show up and show out over these 2 years so that when we're here in this very position in 2026, I can be getting a 4-year, $40 million contract or somewhere in that ballpark. So I think if you can re-sign AJ Epinesa and Daquan Jones, I think Daquan might cost a little bit more than Epinesa just based on his production and where he was playing at before he suffered that season-ending injury. But again, that's priority number one. So the way I see it is starting with defensive end. Right now, it is Greg Rousseau, Von Miller, and Kingsley Jonathan. That leaves essentially 2 roster spots open. And let's just say for the sake of this, that the Bills can re-sign Epinesa. He slots in as defensive end number 3. So that means they need a 4th defensive end. And who can that be? So I think that this could be Yetur Gross-Matos from Carolina. Now, this is a guy who, again, had a lot of hype coming out of college, but he really hasn't lived up to that hype. In 55 career games, he's started only 32 of them, and he has 142 combined tackles and 13 sacks. Now, on the plus side, the most sacks that he had in a season was this past season when he played in only 12 games, and he only started 6 of them. So in only 6 starts and filling in rotationally, he had 4.5 sacks and 36 combined tackles, which was the second best in his career. So I think this is another guy like Epinesa who could be looking for that 1 to 2 year deal. And he's saying, hey, I kind of want to go prove myself. And I know that you guys are looking for some help right now. I think we could go help each other. So I will come here on a cheap 1-2 year prove it kind of deal. I'll help you, you help me. And then we'll see what the deal is in 2025 or 2026. And we know the ties that Buffalo has to Carolina. So I think that that could be a sneaky fit. And like I said, Gross-Matos has been a rotational piece right along. So he's not going to come here expecting to start over Greg Rousseau or Von Miller. So looking at the defensive tackle position now, Ed Oliver is the only one under contract. So this is a huge position that I think the Bills are going to have to tighten up here. So let's just say, again, for the sake of this, that they can get that deal done with Daquan Jones. So that is your starting duo right there. You have Oliver and Daquan Jones, but then essentially you have 3 roster spots open behind that. So I think that this is a year where the Bills are going to have to draft a defensive tackle. I don't want to say round 1 because I really like wide receiver within the first round, maybe even 2 rounds. But by the end of the draft, I think the Bills are definitely going to have a defensive tackle from the rookie class here. And then I'm going to jump to defensive tackle number 5 because I think that is Jordan Phillips' spot, because he's been saying that he's been teetering between retiring or playing again. And I think that's a case where Brandon Beane would say, you know what, if you want one more crack at it, we'll give you a roster spot, 1 year, $2 million deal. It's yours if you want it. If not, we'll find someone else in free agency. So we'll say that Jordan Phillips is defensive tackle number 5. And just like defensive end, you have an opening at defensive tackle number 4. So who can be that rotational piece? That guy who's going to be replacing a Tim Settle, a Linval Joseph, a Poona Ford, someone to that degree. And I think that it could be Greg Gaines. Now, Greg Gaines is a guy who started his career with the Los Angeles Rams, and he played in the Super Bowl with them. And that was the year 2021, where he had a career year, 55 tackles, 4.5 sacks. He followed that up with 36 tackles and 4 sacks in 12 starts in 2022. And then he signed a 1-year deal with Tampa Bay this past season. He only had 24 tackles and a sack. He was more of that rotational piece. But being 6'1", 312 pounds, I think that this could be a perfect rotational piece who, again, he's not going to command a lot of snaps. He's going to know his role, and he just kind of seems like that McDermott guy. I think Taven Bryan is also a name to watch for here. He's bounced around a little bit, most recently playing with the Colts, but I think he was exposed a little bit this past year as a starting nose tackle. He's more of a pass rusher, so that's why I'm in favor of Gaines a little bit more. I think he can be more of a presence in terms of run defense. And the other thing that I like about Greg Gaines is that he has lined up next to Von Miller and Leonard Floyd before. And for what it's worth, if the Bills can re-sign Taylor Rapp, which we'll be getting to at the safety position here, that will be another former teammate. So speaking of former teammates, going to the linebacker position now, I think this is another very interesting piece, and that is Troy Reeder, another former Ram who spent his first few years in the league as an undrafted free agent in LA, and then he signed with the Chargers in 2022, and then he bounced around in 2023 before eventually going back to the Rams. But just like Greg Gaines, I think that Troy Reeder is that experienced, versatile presence that McDermott would covet. And he has an inside-outside flexibility. He played a lot of inside linebacker in college at Delaware, and then he's been more of an outside linebacker at the NFL level. But again, I think that if you're looking for a Terrell Dodson replacement, because assuming that they're healthy, you have Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard as your starting linebackers. And then looking at the rest of the depth chart, you have Dorian Williams and a blank space as your second string, and then Balin Spector and a blank space as your third string. Now, I'm thinking that the Bills are going to want to re-sign Tyler Matakevich for that sixth and final linebacker spot. But Tyrell Dodson is interesting because his market value is about $5 million, but it seems like PFF loves him. And just based on that, you might get a team that says Dodson really improved his game this past season, and we think that he's worth 7, 8, maybe even $9 million. And the Bills aren't going to have that money for Dodson. So I think that he's going to end up walking. And I think Troy Reeder is an interesting veteran who you can get here to solidify that backup position. And you can kind of platoon him with Dorian Williams because, again, with Dorian Williams being that inside-outside linebacker, that gives the Bills that flexibility. And my final two names who I think should be on the Bills' radar this offseason are Jeremy Chinn and Darnell Savage Jr., both coming at the safety position. So let's start with Jeremy Chinn because I think this is a very interesting name because Jeremy Chinn has essentially gotten worse ever since coming into the league in 2020. Now, that was the year that he finished second in Defensive Rookie of the Year rankings after he compiled 117 total tackles. He had 1 interception, 1 sack, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 touchdowns, and 5 passes defended. He followed that up in 2021 with 107 total tackles. Again, he had 5 passes defended, 1 interception, 1 sack. He forced 1 fumble and had 1 fumble recovery. But then in 2022, he started to get hampered by injuries, and that was the year where he only played in 11 games, where he recorded 70 tackles, had no interceptions, no forced fumbles, no fumble recoveries. And then in 2023, this past season, he had his worst season statistically and based on the eye test, as he only played in 12 games, again due to injury, but then he only started 8 of those, playing in just 39% of the team's defensive snaps. And reports out of Carolina were saying that maybe it wasn't the best scheme fit, which is kind of ironic because that was always the thing with Jeremy Chinn, that he was this big, athletic, versatile safety who could play multiple different positions. But for some reason, he just didn't fit in with Carolina's new 3-4 look. So I'm not saying that this guy is going to be damaged goods coming off those 2 injuries, but I do think that he could be an interesting piece for Buffalo, because if you get him here with Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbage, you pair him up with Jordan Poyer, this might be the kind of deal to revitalize his career. Same thing with Darnell Savage as we move to him now, because this is a guy, if you look at his stats, he kind of declined over the years as well. His best season came in 2020 when he had 75 tackles and 4 interceptions, but then his numbers have dipped ever since. Now, Green Bay coaches praised him for his leadership and communication skills as he was one of the veterans on the back end this season. But then I read a report that said that he is more of a run defender. And I thought that that was interesting in itself, because I thought that Savage, at least on the outside looking in, I kind of thought of him as that ball hawk, as that pass coverage safety. And, there's a quote here. Savage's missed tackle rate of 17.3% was the 8th highest among all eligible safeties last season, and his career low is 16.9%. So missed tackles are a big area of his game, and if he's better at defending the run than the pass, then I'm not sure if those two sync up. And then it goes on to say how Savage's 79.2% completion rate when targeted was the 9th highest. But again, if you get him here with McDermott's defense, you pair him up with Jordan Poyer, and he can reunite with Rasul Douglas, maybe this is what he needs to kind of turn his career around. And if you notice, these are guys coming off their rookie contracts. And this is what the Bills did last year, where they targeted guys within this age range, 25 to 28 years old, who maybe they haven't hit their ceiling yet. And for whatever reason, it didn't work with their first team, maybe their second team if they're going into their third contract. But they did this a lot last year. Connor McGovern, David Edwards, Damian Harris, Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, Taylor Rapp. So we might see a similar trajectory this year from Brandon Beane, where he says, you know what, we don't have a lot of money to work with. We're not going to go out and sign that Von Miller like we did a couple of years ago. We need to make some cost-effective moves, and we want to target guys who we think that their best days of playing football are still ahead of them. So they're going to come here, they're going to help us, and we're going to help them, and they can turn that cheaper deal into a longer-term deal after it's all said and done. So those are 5 defensive players who I think make sense for the Bills, on top of re-signing Daquan Jones and AJ Epinesa. And I'm going to throw Taylor Rapp's name in there too, because I think going back to the safety position, this is an interesting situation to monitor, because what do the Bills decide to do here? Assuming Micah Hyde retires, you have Jordan Poyer back for another year. Do you sign Jeremy Chin or Darnell Savage Jr. and try to pair him with Jordan Poyer, and then you can draft a rookie, and then it's going to be one of those free agents with this year's rookie for the future? Or do you run it back with Poyer and Rapp, and then potentially still draft one, because I think they do want to get younger at that position? But then you're in the same predicament next year, where you say, okay, we gave Taylor Rapp a 1-year prove-it deal. Do we re-sign him again long-term? Do we draft another rookie? Do we sign another free agent? So it might get a little bit convoluted, and I think this all just comes down to the money, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Brandon Beane makes it work out. So if you want to see the offensive targets that Kevin Masseri and I came up with, head over to the Built in Buffalo page and make sure to check those out, as we came out with those on Wednesday night on Going Deep Buffalo.